What's up, golf sickos? I'm Dan Rappaport. We are live in the DOGHouse. We're going to talk more about the Ryder Cup. Of course we are, because there's a lot of fallout. There's head loss on the American side of the pond. There's some spicy comments coming out over at the Dunhill, where a lot of the guys on the European team are playing this week. We're going to talk about all of it. I want to start out by acknowledging that my hair situation is a bit tragic. I understand. I dyed it. I bleached it after the Tour Championship. I thought I'd be gone by now. Already got a haircut. It's more frosted tips than anything at this point, but one more haircut, and I think that we should be good. So I want to start with some of these outlandish sort of suggestions about who the next Ryder Cup captain should be. So Phil Mickelson, in between all of his political tweets about oil in Southern California, he is like the biggest reply guy ever when it comes to political issues in the state of California on Twitter. He replied to Kyle Porter. So Kyle Porter is a very well-known golf journalist, and he tweeted, "If the question being posed is, man, Europe's excellence seems to emanate from a trust that is built by establishing relational equity," Jesus, a lot of big words, "and world-class communication at every turn, who can we get to build our version of that? I don't think Tiger Woods is the answer." And the reason that Tiger Woods' name comes up is because he's probably not going to play anymore, and he's been widely rumored to be on track for this captaincy. Tiger is very close with JP McManus, who I think is the owner of Adair Manor. He's an Irish billionaire. He has that pro-am at Adair, or at least used to have that pro-am at Adair Manor every year that Tiger would often play in. And there's been some speculation that it's almost a little bit of a handshake agreement that Tiger was going to captain the U.S. team on the road. And here's what Phil said. "Here's why looking outside of golf to a Coach K or Lou Holtz is worth exploring." I think Lou Holtz is like 85 years old. "Golf is an individual sport that doesn't have teamwork." I'm not sure that I necessarily agree. "Support system, partnership, team analytics, personality traits, and more. The Europeans have a template that teaches and prepares their captains for these skills. US has a new template every 2 years with little continuity." I agree with that. "If a Coach K or a Lou Holtz or someone similar took over, would it be built upon, or would it be scrapped and start over again afterwards? If that's the case, it would be a waste of time and effort and not worth doing to begin with." I am so against the next captain of the U.S. Ryder Cup team being from someone completely outside of golf. We should be, in some respects, looking at Europe as a model. What do they do so well? Has Europe ever had a captain who's never played professional golf before? They did, after they lost at Whistling Straits and they got thumped, did they make Jose Mourinho the captain, or did they make Pep Guardiola the captain? No, they went with a former professional golfer. And I understand the desire to go big when something like this happens, when you lose a Ryder Cup at home. But it reminds me of when the Browns, remember the Browns were going to interview Condoleezza Rice to be their head coach? Like, I don't think that that is the answer at all. I think there might be sort of a quote unquote nuclear option as far as the captain goes, but I don't think it's the right move. I think if you want to go outside the box, we have a team golf system in the United States that is very successful in a very healthy ecosystem, and it's college golf. And these coaches of college golf teams, it's actually kind of a similar role to the Ryder Cup captain, because they don't actually coach the players on X's and O's. The coach of Oklahoma State, Alan Bratton. The coach of Arizona State, Matt Thurmond. The coach of Florida, J.C. Deacon. I think he's actually Canadian, so he might be out of the running here. They're not telling these guys what positions to get at the top. They're not telling these guys how to chip or how to putt. They are there to put their players in a position to succeed, and they're there to build a team and to build community. And I have gone on the road and gone to all of these college programs, and that sense of camaraderie, that sense of playing for the guy next to you, it exists in college golf. They have found a way to bring all of these individuals from different parts of the country, and oftentimes from different parts of the world, and get them to unite behind a badge. So I think having someone like Alan Bratton, not as the captain, because I think it will be Tiger. We have to be realistic here. They're not going to give the captaincy to someone that you've never heard of before. And I don't mean to disrespect they're not going to give the captaincy to someone completely off the radar. But I think a captaincy team of Tiger Woods at the helm, who's going to take it extremely seriously, because he always takes everything that he does really seriously, surrounded by a stats guy like a Dodo Molinari, who I think should be a full-time sort of position within the U.S. team. I think there should be people who are assistant captains for every U.S. Ryder Cup. I don't think that we should just bring in a captain, and then he gets to choose all of his buddies who he played on tour with to be his assistant captains. There needs to be some continuity. And this is what I've said before about the President's Cup. We have a dress rehearsal every off year from the Ryder Cup. And I said this on the show. I think the President's Cup might be an active negative for the U.S. Ryder Cup ecosystem right now because it's a different captain. Brandt Snedeker is the captain of the President's Cup team this year. You have a different captain. The bad taste in these players' mouths, I think, goes away when they get to play the President's Cup and beat up on an overmatched international team. Imagine if they lose the President's Cup, by the way, at home at Medina. It's possible, but I don't think it will happen because the talent gap is so severe. But why are we not using the President's Cup as a dress rehearsal for the Ryder Cup? And the PGA Tour, does everything they can with the President's Cup, but I think the goal for there should be to build continuity. And if it's going really well, keep the captain. Keep the captain. This whole starting over every year clearly isn't working. What we don't need with the captain, though, is what the PGA of America did this time with Keegan Bradley. We don't need a guy who could be on the team and put him in this horrible position. So, Keegan Bradley is one of the dogs that we have in the U.S. Ryder Cup ecosystem, in professional American golf. He's a guy who is a little bit of a psycho. And again, I say psycho with the utmost respect. I think we need psychos. I think we have a distinct lack of psychos, a distinct lack of dogs. I think Keegan would have been perfect for this team. And there's a name that I was thinking about. And, I got to put my hand up. I didn't talk about him being on the team at all, but a guy like Patrick Reed. Maybe he's not the most popular player out there, but at least he fights. At least he, bleeds for the Ryder Cup. Like, it's everything to him. We need more guys who bleed for the Ryder Cup, who it's everything to them. Shane Lowry said, and I believe him, that was the best moment of his career. And in that career, included in that career, is winning a major championship on the island that he was born in Ireland. And he said that making that putt was more important because he lives for the Ryder Cup. I think we need more guys who live for the Ryder Cup. And I think helping us toward that end will be some new blood. Our crop of players have a little bit of scar tissue because they've been losing and losing and losing. And we need some guys who haven't been a part of a bunch of losing teams. So I'm thinking a guy like Jackson Koivin, who's the number one amateur in the world, and according to Data Golf is already like a top 50 player in the world. They won the Walker Cup. I think we need a Jackson Koivin to be on that team. I think we need a Luke Clanton to be on that team. We need to build a new culture, and it's hard to build a new culture with guys who have the baggage of losing Ryder Cups in the past. I'm thinking about a guy like Akshay Bhatia, who's a little bit of a fiery character and could bring energy to the team. Chris Goddard, a little bit of that New Jersey energy. You know what I mean? Like New York, fight for everything. A little bit of grit, a little bit of flash, a little bit of intensity. I felt like this team just struggled because a lot of the personalities on this team just don't fire each other up. They're really good stroke play players. And toward that end, we also have, we have the President's Cup as a sort of dress rehearsal. We also have the Zurich Classic. We need to use the Zurich Classic in a Ryder Cup year as another dress rehearsal. I think the captain of the American team should tell the guys who to play with. I think all of the best players should play. I think that would be sort of a team building exercise before, just 2 weeks before the Ryder Cup when they all play in Napa and you're actually playing in the formats. You're playing four balls, you're playing foursomes. I think all of our top guys, if they're serious about winning that Ryder Cup at Adair Manor, should play in the Zurich Classic, get comfortable with it, learn the other guys' tendencies, learn their personalities, use that as another dress rehearsal. Another thing that I was thinking about, and this might sound a little bit crazy, but what about the point standing? Should we redo the points? So as it goes right now, the top 6 guys in the points make it automatically, but those points start the whole calendar year before. So how you performed in a major 15, 16 months before the Ryder Cup counts. I almost wonder if you just go for the captain, just pick the 12 guys. And you might say, oh, that's going to lead to a boys club. That's going to lead to a boys club. No, it's not. There is a red ass, I think, in the American Ryder Cup ecosystem right now because what just happened was unacceptable. Losing a Ryder Cup at home is unacceptable. So there'd be a lot of overlap, right? There'd be a lot of overlap. It's not like they're going to pick a bunch of guys who aren't in the top 50 in the world who, can't find the middle of the club face, but maybe a little bit more leeway for the captain to be able to pick his team, you're still going to pick all the top 10 players, but maybe not having your hands tied with a Harris English making it on points because he played well in a couple majors on his own ball. It's just so completely different. It's so completely different, and we're using the data and the points from all of these 72 all stroke play events played in the United States, and it just is not applicable to the Ryder Cup. So let's move on to a lot of this chatter about the crowd. And I'm telling you guys, being completely honest with you, because I'm always honest with you, I was there in New York. I was also there at Rome. It was not apples to apples. It was not apples to apples at all. The only sort of personal insults that I heard in Rome were to Patrick Cantlay about being paid to play in the Ryder Cup. They weren't about his wife. They weren't calling him homophobic slurs. And I think it's a pretty lazy kind of burying your head in the sand move to try to compare the two atmospheres in Rome and at Bethpage Black. It absolutely crossed the line at Bethpage Black. We all knew it was going to. We talked about it. We said, play stupid games, win stupid prizes, bring a Ryder Cup to Long Island, to New York, combined with the dynamic of golf where there's this expectation of silence and guys are right there. We've seen all these videos that are coming out after the Ryder Cup of people acting like buffoons, like clowns, calling Rory McIlroy, the F word, which F word I'm talking about, making fun of Shane Lowry's weight. It was not the same at all. And I saw a lot of chatter on the internet about, well, Rory was going back at the fans and Rory was saying F you to the fans, and you can't have it both ways, right? You can't say that golf should be held to a higher standard and then also, be saying F you to the crowd. I completely disagree with that. Imagine you're walking down the street, okay, and someone comes up to you and punches you in the face, and then you punch them back. Do you then not have the right to say, hey, people shouldn't walk up to me in the street and punch me in the face? No. It was a human reaction. And I keep it straight with you guys. When Rory does bullshit stuff, we call it out. When he was being super moody about the driver failing the test and not wanting to talk to the media, we said Rory's in a bad mood. He shouldn't be doing this. I'm on Rory's side here. Just because he reacted, because every man has a boiling point, does not mean that he somehow forfeits the right to stand on the pedestal that golf should be held to a higher standard. I think golf should be held to a higher standard. I think what we saw at Bethpage was unacceptable. I think it absolutely crossed the line. And I think, a little bit of blame probably lies with the U.S. team, not necessarily the players, but sort of the leadership with the PGA of America. I think it would have been really easy for Keegan to say at the microphone, hey, some of the stuff that was said about Rory McIlroy and some of the stuff that was said about all of these players was not acceptable. And we want the fans to cheer for their team, but we don't want them to focus on tormenting the European team. And I think that would have went a long way. And they didn't do it. And I think the Europeans noticed that they didn't do it because the Europeans are not happy. So we're going to read two quotes. The first from Tyrrell Hatton. So a lot of the European players are playing this week at the Dunhill, which I can't imagine how much of a chaser that feels like. It was like a shot of tequila and then a lime juice afterward. Like the craziness of Bethpage, everyone yelling at you, calling you fat, calling you slurs, and then you get to go play back at Links, and also the softest golf course in the history of the world. Again, I said this a lot on the show. I'm going to say it again. That was unrecognizable. Bethpage Black was, and a lot of comments. We had a clip that went pretty viral about the golf course, and so many people in the comments were saying, I've played Bethpage all the time for the last 30 years. I've never seen it play like that. You go from that to the Firm Links in Scotland. They're at St. Andrews, and they're at, I think, Carnoustie and Kings Barnes this week. I don't know exactly the rotation, but it must feel incredible for those guys to be back on their home soil, having done what they did. But so a lot of them are getting asked about the Ryder Cup and about the crowd, and was it the same? Was it the same? And here's what Tyrrell Hatton said. Personally, I don't think they were close at all. I certainly, with what I heard last week, I don't think Rome comes anywhere near that. To be honest, personally, I don't agree with what they said, what they both said there. I don't know what else to add to that. He's talking about Don Rea, the head of the PGA of America, and Keegan Bradley. I think they are quite far apart, to be honest. I completely agree. And then Matt Fitzpatrick, who you could tell after a good Ryder Cup showing, is a little bit more confident. We saw him after he made that putt with Bryson, and he gave them the calm down. You would never see that before from Fitz in the past. He said, I saw the interview with the PGA guy discussing about it was the same in Rome. It's pretty offensive to European fans, the fact that he said that, really. I don't want to speak on behalf of everyone, but we did feel there was a little bit of bitterness when they presented the trophy there and shook their hands, calling out the PGA of America leadership. We're going to watch that clip in a second. I think it was they can't control what comes out of everyone's mouth. There's no doubt about it. I wouldn't say we were looking for an apology, but I would say it's understandable that they would apologize. I've had a number of friends who are Americans send messages, texts, all sorts, apologizing for the fans and saying, really sorry that you had to deal with that stuff. I think for me personally, people were giving me abuse about my braces. They were giving me abuse about my Skechers. Like that was kind of the extent that I heard. I'm sure there were probably words that I didn't hear. Adair Manor can't get here soon enough. The Ryder Cup has incredible juice right now because the European team, I think they agree with what I said earlier that the leadership on the US side could have gone further toward creating a friendlier atmosphere. And I'm probably going to get some shit for this because I am an American and I'm sure that most of you watching are Americans, but the European fans do it better. They just do. If you've ever been to a European soccer game, you can understand what I'm talking about. The sense of camaraderie, the sense of togetherness, the willingness to sing these songs. We don't have any songs. The only songs we have are USA. The Europeans have a song for it feels like every single player, and there is a different atmosphere over in Europe. And I'm sure that at Adair Manor, almost to prove a point, I think that the Irish fans are going to be pretty damn respectful of the Americans. I really do. I think they're going to want to show that they are different, that it's not all the same. So speaking of the head of the PGA of America, Don Rea, I think that's how you pronounce it. So there was this clip that came out, pretty damning clip, if you ask me. He was asked about the fan behavior, and he just took his head and buried it straight in the sand. Let's watch that clip.
To see, especially because this week some of the fans' behaviour has perhaps crossed the line in some people's opinion. What have you made of that?
Well, you got 50,000 people there that are really excited, and heck, you can go to a youth soccer game and get some people who say the wrong things. We tell the fans is, listen, booing at somebody doesn't make them play worse. Typically, it makes them play better. And when our American players have to control the crowds, that distracts them from playing. So our message today to everybody who's out here is cheer on the Americans like never before, because that'll always get them to play better and get them out of crowd control and let them perform.
What have you made of some of the fairly personal abuse, though, that has been hurled at Rory McIlroy in particular?
I haven't heard some of that. I'm sure it's happened. It happens when we're over in Rome on the other side, and Rory understands. I thought he handled the press conference yesterday amazingly. But yeah, things are like that are going to happen, and I don't know what was said, but all I know is golf is the engine of good.
That is what leadership does not look like. Again, I was in Rome, and they were chirping the Americans and they were waving their hats at Patrick Cantlay, but it didn't cross that personal line like it did at Bethpage Black. A lot of people have asked me, I've been home for a few days, how was the Ryder Cup? And I said, it wasn't my favorite experience. It really wasn't. It just felt nasty. And Justin Thomas said, we didn't give them enough to cheer about, but I understand he's not wanting to piss off the fans, but I don't think that is really an excuse because you get off to a slow start. Your fans have the go ahead to just throw everything at the wall with what they say, and nothing is off limits. I've just been really disappointed as it's marinated as these last couple of days. I was just really disappointed in sort of the whole experience at Bethpage Black, between the setup, between the fans. So yeah, I look, Adair Manor, I think we're going to see a different energy, I would hope, out of the United States team, because this was like a break of serve in tennis. The narrative going into this week was home teams win Ryder Cups. That's how it happens. That's how it goes down. This was a break of serve, and none of these guys were on the team in 2012 when they lost at Medina. They went to 2014 and they got smacked. Let's hope that doesn't happen. But it inspired a new energy in the Ryder Cup. There was a task force after 2014. They won 2016 at home. They won 2021 at home. Guys like Xander, guys like Cantlay, guys like Scotty, guys like Cameron Young, who are very likely to be on that team in 2 years. I think they're going to come in with a different energy. So to summarize everything, I think getting a college golf coach and a statistician on a permanent U.S. Ryder Cup squad that doesn't change all the time, I think is really important. I think new blood is really important. I want to see some of these young guys break through. I want to see us also not be so married to data golf statistics and maybe, choose some guys because of how much the Ryder Cup means to them. Obviously, you're not going to pick the number 300 player in the world, but the difference between the number 10 player in the world and the number 35 player in the world, especially with how the world rankings are all screwed up right now. And hopefully that's fixed by then. It's not that big. What's more important, I think, is the spirit and how much the Ryder Cup means to these guys. And I think that should be something that needs to be considered. It's hard to believe the next Ryder Cup is still 2 years away because this one still feels so fresh. I cannot wait to see all of these changes that we're speculating on. You know, the Ryder Cup captain's got to be announced pretty soon. This process has to start pretty soon. It's gonna be a crazy show at Adair Manor because I think there's so much emotion in the Ryder Cup right now on the European side. They're trying to build on it. Do they keep Luke Donald? We'll see. I'm sure they would gonna ask him. It's a question of whether he is willing to sacrifice another 2 years of his playing career, which is already sort of petering out. But, you know, golfers are interesting people. They probably still believe that he has another run in him, and he's still pretty far away from turning 50. So he's kind of in this limbo in his own career. But all these questions that we have are going to be answered pretty soon, and they're going to be fascinating answers, because I think there's a general sense in the US that was not okay. Losing at home is not okay. You know, it's one thing if you're the international team and you're just completely outmatched talent-wise, but on paper, and everyone says, well, it was so obvious that the Americans were outmatched. They weren't. If you look at the advanced stats, it was a dead heat with the Americans almost a little bit ahead going into the Ryder Cup. So let's see what happens. But I disagree that we need to go with someone who's completely outside of golf. I disagree that Tiger is somehow the wrong choice. I think he's going to bring an intensity that we need. And yeah, we'll see what happens. I don't have all the answers, but I tried to give you as many as I can. We'll talk to you soon.